guest, President Aaron Peskin of the Board of Supervisors. He and I go back years when I was a lowly member of the Government Elections Committee, and he was merely a supervisor before he was a president, and now he's a president again. So, Aaron, the floor is yours. Speak away, sir.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you to CSFN for having me this evening. And let me just start out by, I know a lot of you over the years, but by saying to Al Fontes, who's on this Zoom meeting, who sits in the seat where this all began for me, which was getting involved in my neighborhood organization, wherein eventually in the late 1990s, I became president of the Telegraph Hill Dwellers, which Al is doing a really great job with now. And one thing led to another. So all of you be very careful. It could lead to the disaster that is being a member of the City Council or Board of Supervisors in the City and County of San Francisco. So be careful what you wish for. Yeah, so that was in the year 2000. It was the advent of district elections. It's amazing how history repeats itself. It was during the time of .com 1.0. We were in an economic growth spurt, and the issues that have been repeatedly the issues in San Francisco that come with booming economies of displacement and chain stores and all sorts of things resulted in a profound role for neighborhood organizations that coalesced under the umbrella of the coalition, which we were active members in then, and my heart still lies with THD, and we are active members in now. I say my other hat, and my wife is, I don't know what her role, what is she, Al? She the historian, the vice president?
Vice president and historian.
Well, my wife is the vice president, who knew? And along the way, and I was in my second term, I had the pleasure and pain of being the president for the entirety of my second term of board presidency. As most of you know, is a 2-year term elected by one's colleagues. And in 2005 and again in 2007, I got the unanimous nod from the then Board of Supervisors. And at the end of that term, actually kind of at the beginning of my second term as president, we had the Great Recession. And you all know the budget process in San Francisco, not really different than the federal and state budget processes. The executive, our mayor, proposes, the board deliberates and disposes. Our budget at that time was a little more than half the size it is today, if you can think about that. And here we are with a profound shift in San Francisco in many ways, politically, economically, and it's been, we all know what it's been a tough 3 years, and San Francisco is got, let's face it, challenges. You just heard from your last speaker from Rescue SF about our street homelessness and behavioral health crisis that is ongoing and raging. And it's come with a huge economic downturn, which this Board of Supervisors gets to wrestle with in the near term and probably the midterm until hopefully our world bounces back. But it comes with, I think, some, albeit difficult, extraordinary opportunities. The politics of scarcity is a political environment where we are forced to make tough choices. I would like to think that I am prepared to assist in that and to help assist my colleagues in that as we have tough choices to make, as we have to rethink the number of departments that we have, where consolidations are possible, what things are excess to what I think my next 2 years, a little less than that, of board presidency really is about, which is a back to basics, nuts and bolts, address some of the basics. In good times, you have the luxury of expanding things. In tough times, you've really got to take care of your core services. I'm talking about public works, which is central to all of us. relative to everything that we all experience: clean streets, graffiti abatement, our urban tree canopy, to aspects of that department that are harder to see but are equally important, from the Bureau of Building Repair to our county surveyor. That department has been beleaguered by virtue of a corruption scandal that some of you called out and were concerned about back in its heyday when, God rest his soul, Mayor Lee was the mayor. And let's also face it, I think neighborhoods are under attack in a number of different ways. And my message to you this evening is keep doing what you're doing. I am delighted to see that there are new member organizations that are joining CSFN tonight. This is kind of a, if you will, although some of you go through your own elections, an unelected conscience of San Francisco. And I, for one, welcome you, want to hear from you, even when we are on different sides of issues. I, recently, last year, had to work with neighbors in the 3rd Supervisorial District, which, as you know, encompasses the northeast corner of the city, from Fisherman's Wharf to Union Square, and from Van Ness Avenue to the Ferry Building, that corner of the world. And I had to work with neighbors who were not happy to see a homeless facility installed on the 700 block of Post, but they were equally unhappy to see the unhoused in that neighborhood. So these are the conundrums that we face, and I look forward to doing that with my newest colleague, Joel Engardio, who is here this evening, who I am delighted to see, like me, is still in his office at this late hour at a supervisor. And I am happy to answer questions. Charles has peppered me with a few yesterday and a few today, some of which I have to say, if you ever have the pleasure and pain of being a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, we are jacks of all trades, masters of little, if all of them. But I am happy to give my best shot on questions ranging from Park Merced to 2550 Irving to recology and the like. And as I told Charles, I am speaking at a place nearby City Hall at 7:30. So a few minutes after 7, I'm going to transfer this to my cell phone and you will see me en route, but happy to continue answering questions as I move about. And with that, thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this evening.
Okay, thank you for coming, Aaron. Our first question tonight is, Supervisor, thank you for helping facilitate our research on high-rise earthquake vulnerabilities. What do the experts tell you is likely to happen to the dozens of high-rises in San Francisco whose foundations rest entirely on fill that may be likely to liquefy during a major earthquake, excuse me, and when will they be retrofitted, perhaps?
Yeah.
Earth-shaking question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a second question?
No, that's an earth-shaking question.
I didn't hear the last part of what you said, Charles.
Bad pun, don't worry.
Okay. So as everybody knows, and I say this only a couple of weeks after the abject disaster in Syria and Turkey, we live in a seismically challenged area next to a transform fault that we are all very, very aware of, called the San Andreas Fault. And I just want to deviate for just a second to say that it is fascinating to me, and I have really thought about this repeatedly over the last couple of 3 years, that the lore of San Francisco is deeply interconnected and intertwined with the 1906 earthquake and subsequent fires. And I'm actually very proud of the fact that with all of our other challenges, generations of mayors and supervisors have addressed seismic resiliency before resiliency was part of the common lexicon. In the same breath, and this is the fascinating thing that I've been kind of ruminating about, the 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic that hit San Francisco and the rest of the globe was largely lost to history. And it actually killed in this city many more people. I mean, by a factor of, I think, 7 or 8 than the 1906 earthquake and fire. And interestingly enough, 100 years later, and we were no exception, were very ill prepared for a global pandemic. The good news is we are much better prepared for an earthquake in any number of ways relative to our ongoing amendments of our fire and building codes, relative to the widespread and quite sophisticated firefighting apparatus that we have, relative to, and yes, it is not all over San Francisco, and yes, it is lacking from the west side, our auxiliary water supply system, but there is much more to do. And by the way, none of this could be done without and this is true for generations, it is not only true recently, the ongoing generosity of San Francisco voters who have time and again voted for emergency safety bonds dating back decades that are used all over town for a slew of different capital investments in our resiliency. Having said that, you will note that the buildings that performed very poorly in not only the earthquake in Syria and Turkey are non-ductile concrete buildings. The city undertook a number of, and none of these are very popular with people who have to pay for them, different seismic retrofitting legal mandates, starting in the wake of the Loma Prieta earthquake with our unreinforced masonry buildings, about 3,000 of them, where the city passed a law, this is before even my political time, that said that owners of these unreinforced masonry buildings, read brick buildings, had to bring them up to reinforce current seismic standards. And I am pleased to report that all of those buildings now, more than 2 decades after the Loma Prieta earthquake, have been retrofitted. The next round of that, and we saw in Loma Prieta all of the soft story buildings, particularly those that were on substrate that was subject to liquefaction. If you happen to start out as a geology major in college, but then the math was too tough for me, so I got out, you know about the P waves and the S waves, which lead to liquefaction, particularly in areas where there is fill, like the marina. And interestingly enough, when I first got to the board in 2001, there was a robust effort by interests that did not want to see the soft story program move forward. Our then mayor at the time, Willie Lewis Brown Jr., managed to scuttle the attempts to do that, although the work of the seismic program at UC Berkeley survived. And interestingly enough, it was not until Mayor Ed Lee's term that that mandate finally went through, and those buildings were categorized into 4 categories, 1 through 4, and 3 of those categories have been fulfilled, and the 4th is underway. And you have probably seen that disruptive work all over town, buildings with huge garages, ground floor commercial spaces that have lots of windows that have needed bracing. But there is still a category, and remember, San Francisco is a town that was largely built out before state-of-the-art seismic codes were in place, before we learned things from earthquakes in Japan and the like. And those we have been whittling away at. And the next round really is the non-ductile mid-rise or larger buildings, most of them clustered in the downtown and south of Market. The price of doing this is astronomical to those property owners, which you have to take into account. For instance, I just passed in a similar vein a law that required retrofitting of mid-rise buildings that predate our sprinkler ordinance. And while there had been different laws, one of them actually passed when I first got here, authored by my then seatmate, Supervisor Gavin Newsom, missed either because of lobbying or whatever it was, a category of about 112 mid-rise buildings, also mostly clustered in and around the downtown. And at the Golden Gateway Apartments, not far from the Telegraph Hill dweller boundaries, there were not one, but two fires that thankfully neither one of which resulted in loss of life, but both of which would have been easily put out with sprinklers. And the Board of Supervisors, after lots of lobbying against us, late last year passed an ordinance to require those to be retrofitted. And we are moving in that direction on non-ductile concrete. You can tell I'm a little bit into this and I've talked about it too long, but a lot of this results from my very unhappy, unsuccessful look at a sinking and tilting millennium structure that has gotten me into all aspects of geotechnical stuff, particularly as it relates to, going back to the 1906 earthquake, an area of town that was largely filled with rubble after the 1906 earthquake. I hope that touches on what I assume David Osgood asked. And David, thank you for your continual advocacy on this. I know it is not moving as fast as we would like, but we are getting there.
Thank you, sir. Our next question has to do with Park Merced. Park Merced is currently owned by Maximus Real Estate Partners. Maximus is currently in loan forbearance for Park Merced property, may default early next year. Since neither the city nor the state appear to have funding to purchase the property, would it be feasible for a private for-profit developer and city partnership, public-private partnership, to purchase the property with the city, negotiating a 30-year option to purchase all or parts of Park Merced?
Well, I would start with this, and I say this as somebody who does real estate for a living in my real life. Not unless it's for sale or it takes two to tango. And even if we had the money and we had the ability to enter or to find public financing with a private partner, the first question is, do you have a willing seller or somebody who's willing to enter into an option to purchase in 5 years or 20 years or 30 years? And my understanding, and I actually checked with my District 7 colleague, Supervisor Melgar, today. And by the way, I know Bert Palacci, who's the local Park Merced representative. And I know Rob Rosiani, who is Maximus out of New York. And my understanding is it's not for sale. So I think, to the extent that they are in financial trouble and they're spiraling the drain and they want to, and by the way, this is happening with Veritas, which is the largest owner of residential rental real estate in San Francisco, and they're in trouble and they want to talk, we can see what we can do creatively together. But until they come to that conclusion or their lenders come to that conclusion, it's premature.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Next question is short and sweet. Is the Board of Supervisors working on legislation to establish care courts?
Yes, it is. My colleague, and I'll before I even say my colleague, Raphael Mandelman, I will start by saying that upon my kind of weird and serendipitous election on January 9th, Supervisor Ingardio's first day on the board, welcome to one of the weirder presidential contests that I have been a part of. I actually announced my intention to create a committee of the Board of Supervisors solely around homelessness and behavioral health. Such a thing has never existed on the board, and to vest it with financial powers. And that was, of course, was subject to a change in the board's rules, which requires a 2/3 vote. And was voted on and adopted subsequently unanimously by the board. So thank you to my colleagues for that vote. Supervisor Mandelman, who I have not yet assigned to that committee, but I expect to do so in the next few days, has been very, very interested in that particular subject matter, Charles, and is holding a hearing in March on that. And the answer is yes.
Okay, very good. Which brings up the next question.
And by the way, just so that we're clear, while it is a state mandate, God bless the state of California and my former seatmate, Governor Newsom, but it didn't come with much, if any, money. But we'll cross that bridge.
Right. Very good. On March 21st, again, the Board of Supervisors will be sitting as Committee of the Whole to meet to hear from the Department of Homeless
Yes.
Supportive Services, et cetera, about implementing Place for All.
Correct.
As chair, as president of the board and as chair of the Committee of the Whole, what do you expect, what do you hope for will be the outcome of the hearing?
Well, the answer is Supervisor Mandelman is the quarterback on that issue. He and I actually have a meeting to start thinking about how we are going to structure that hearing. I think our meeting is Thursday or Friday of this week. But bottom line is, I think as a matter of policy, and I don't want to put words in my colleague's mouth, that this city is coming to the conclusion that the policy fight historically around this issue has been what means shelter. And there has historically been resistance from certain quarters, complicated by a legal precedent in Boise, Idaho, and further complicated recently by a federal court injunction against the city and county of San Francisco relative to moving unhoused individuals off the streets. And the historic policy disagreement or area of friction has been what constitutes shelter. And of course, everybody would love to have decent housing. The answer is the only way, or this is my answer, the only way we can attack this is that while we do, as a matter of law and case law, have to offer individuals a place, a shelter, bed, or cot should fulfill that. I think that's where Supervisor Mandelman is going in that conversation. And at this point, I'm inclined to follow him there.
Okay, very good. The Police Commission has passed a general order regarding procedural trafficking stops. The SFPD's position is the department does not particularly want to see a prohibited list of violations. What are your thoughts about the BOS weighing in on this, the Board of Supervisors?
My thought, I'm not a criminal justice expert, but my thoughts are that, and this is not just a San Francisco conversation, this is an urban policing around the country conversation. And my direct daily, literally daily interactions are with the captain of the Central Police District that covers almost all of my supervisorial district. But there's no question statistically that pretextual stops have resulted in inequitable use of the law. The question is this hindering our law enforcement personnel from doing their job? I think the way it's crafted, and particularly how the list was narrowed during the public process that the Police Commission undertook, is worth seeing if it works and results in changes to those statistics. So that's where I'm at it. I think that the Police Commission really listened and thought about it. But let's see how it works and let's see where the numbers go and see whether it's revisited. At this point, I would not be inclined to have the Board of Supervisors jump into the Police Commission's business.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Now we have a few minutes left for people not on my script to ask questions of
What
you.
happened to recology? I thought you were going to ask about recology.
Well, that's already been answered.
Oh,
okay. And I just want to remind people that our members go first when it comes to asking questions, and then time permitting, other people may ask questions after that as well. Okay, and as people have already put up hands with their remote devices, please raise your hand, and then we will go first to Claire Zavansky.
Hey, Claire.
Hey, Aaron, it's so great to see you, and I'm glad you're still there. I can tell you're in your office. I'm so familiar with those offices. Two questions. One is, what's going on with the issue of public comment and the desire to restrict that while you guys are still on SF.gov TV? I think you have to require it. And the other one is, since I also represent city and county retirees, we're concerned about the fact that many of our departments are woefully understaffed, and with the budget constraints, a lot of departments are being discouraged from hiring the replacements they need. And what do you see happening with this? And can the board help get money to those departments to get those much needed positions filled? Thank you.
Claire, I'm sorry, your first question was what? Because then I started thinking about your second question.
Public comment.
Yes. So this is a rather fascinating topic as it relates to public comment. Up until March the 17th or 18th, I used to come down here in the 1990s and make my comment at committee or at the full board of supervisors, and that's the way the world worked. And then March 17th, we shut down, but the government still had to run, and none of us could leave our houses. And this little thing that we're talking over right now, all of a sudden became ubiquitous, and it has changed everything. And by the way, is in part responsible for our lagging economy, because you want to know what? I don't have to fly down to LA for the day for my business meeting, and it has just changed life as we know it, and it changed the way members of the public interact with their government, which is supposed to encourage public participation and public comment. And now the question is, do we put that genie back in the bottle or not? Because on February 28th, the governor of the state of California and the city and county of San Francisco are 3 years later ending their emergency, and we've got some decisions to make. And they range the gamut from and to answer your question, Claire, ADA accommodations are mandated as a matter of law. Remote public comment is not. So the question is, do you allow unlimited remote public comment? You have to allow ADA accommodations for anybody who requests them and has a disability. Or do you do what, by the way, we have been doing at the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, which seems to be working, which is to say that public comment by remote commenters is limited to a certain period of time, like 20 minutes per item, which is 10 speakers, or 30 minutes per item, which is 15 speakers. So the board is wrestling with that. And by the way, not just the board is wrestling with that. 130 Brown Act bodies, every commission, every advisory body, every CAC is also wrestling with that. And the one thing I am profoundly desirous of is that we don't have 18 different rules and systems. So this is also requiring a discussion between the board and the mayor's office, between the board and the city administrator's office. But next Monday at the Rules Committee of the Board of Supervisors, the 27th, the day before the state emergency ends, and we are all left to our own devices and our own rules, the committee, now chaired by my colleague Supervisor Matt Dorsey with Supervisor Shaman Walton and Asha Safai, will be considering a proposal from Supervisor Mandelman, which I don't know where it will land or what the board will ultimately do. And we have certainly heard the hue and cry for not tinkering with the current system. I am sympathetic to that, but we will see how it evolves in this body over the next 8 days. As to the second question, Claire, even with an economic downturn and our having to cut $750 million out of this budget in the next 2 years, we have the same problem in this city government as private corporations have. As Ben Rosenfield said to me, our controller, our esteemed controller said to me, you know, Aaron, I spent the last decade of my life trying to figure out how to get rid of 3,000 city employees. I'm not going to probably spend the next decade of my life trying to figure out how to hire 3,000 city employees, which is to say, want to be a cop? We got a job for you. If you want to drive a bus, we got a job for you. If you want to be a policy analyst, we got a job for you. There are vacancies across this government, from nurses to you name it. And we are doing our best not only to recruit, but to streamline our civil service hiring process. So there are the answers to Claire's questions. And oh my God, it's 7:13. I'm going to switch to my cell phone and try to answer the next question as I run to the mission district.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor.
Try to get you have one more question at least. I would remind people that one question per person, please. Barbara Heffernan. Please unmute yourself, Barbara. Can't hear you.
I'm unmuted finally. Aaron, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts, you know, with SB9 passing and now sort of unlimited and obstruction-free development in the city under the guise of providing affordable housing. Can we as residents protect the character of our city? I mean, I, as a resident, feel quite helpless. I'm on the board of Cow Hollow, and we've had many meetings and discussions about this. And there's a project on Lombard Street, which is going to be green lighted. And it's going to be 78 feet high, much higher than any of the other buildings, which will change the character of Lombard Street totally. And even another project that is again being green lighted on residential house in my neighborhood, and allow the developer to go back to the original design. What can we as residents do?
Hold on, let me just.
What's your
Can you hear
question?
me?
Yeah, what can we as residents do with, I mean, we're almost helpless. These laws have come into place and Sacramento has taken over all zoning.
Okay, that's going to be a question for one of our resolutions that Susan is here to speak about.
I wish I could answer that question. It is a new world out there, and it is very frustrating, and I really wish I had answers for you. It is a conundrum, and I would start by saying some of the authors of some of those bills are our own representatives. So it starts here with organizing and making sure that those individuals hear those perspectives and legislate accordingly. But I share your frustrations.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. Do you have time for one more question as you're walking the hallway?
I do. I'm walking.
Okay, Mary Eliza.
Okay, since you're on your way to the mission, we got the mission question for you. I'm not going to ask you what you think should be done policy-wise as far as the issues going on with the streets in the mission. I just want to know if you think it's possible for the Board of Supervisors to come up with a procedural process that would include the fire department and the emergency workers being approving or reviewing or at least having some kind of word in determining any changes to the streets that would make it difficult for them to operate on the streets. Is that something the Board of Supervisors could do, set up in a procedural manner so that it wouldn't be, you know, a policy decision, but a procedural one?
So, Mary Eliza, I think you're.
You're frozen.
Green lanes and red lanes and street closures. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I'm referring to the fact that the police, some of the police firefighters, I'm sorry, some of the firefighters have come out with strong words about the barriers going up in the mission, particularly right now, but they could put them anywhere. If they could put them in the mission, they could put them anywhere. And they're already having a lot of trouble getting around the city. So other people have trouble, but I do believe it would be important for the supervisors to consider what they might do to change the procedures that would allow the firefighters and the emergency responders to have some kind of say in what can be done and what cannot be done with regard to their needs, just their needs.
Yeah, I would need to, I mean, I understand the laws and the various venues around this. Are you referring to Cap Street or what are you referring to?
Well, it's Cap Street today, but it could be your street tomorrow.
Slow streets also.
No, I'm just referring to the fact that there's been media attention and I can send you the articles if you haven't seen them. There's been on TV. The firefighters are concerned because they can't get around. I drove around that neighborhood and it's a maze. It's a maze. You cannot get in and out of those closed block streets. I cannot in my car. I assume a fire truck would really have a lot of trouble.
Okay, let's have him answer your question.
Okay, he was asking.
Yeah, so I mean, look here, I think the SFMTA has, as you know, charter authority dating back to the year 2000 as it relates to control of the streets that they are supposed to do in conjunction with the fire department. The ultimate scheme, if you wanted to change the fact that the SFMTA is at the top of that pyramid and the fire department is not as hegemonic as they used to be, would be that you would have to go back to the charter.
Okay, we'll talk about that further then. Thank you.
Okay, great. Aaron, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Keep on doing what you're doing, everybody.
Let's hear it for the supervisor, president.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Hooray. Thank you.
Bye for now. Take good care.